Hello, welcome to part 2 of the Paris series that I just started not so long ago. Was it last week that I uploaded the first one? I don't remember, doesn't matter. It's online, where I tour bookstores in Paris for you. And this time I'm going to talk about my Paris TBR, so books about Paris I want to read, which is what I'm gonna introduce in a second. I just wanted to give a heads up because I had some technical issues shooting this video and I have attempted to repair them in post, but not everything can be repaired, so please forgive me for any glitches that you can find in this video. And if you don't notice them, then I guess that's good for you and good for me. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, you can see it right after this one, or you can see it first. I'm gonna link it up in the description below, and without further ado... Hi! We're in Paris and the sun is out, which is quite a rarity, in February at least. So it looks like it's summer, but it's just because we're on the last floor and it's warm because of the sun. So, you know what? It's time to celebrate. This Paris series is going to be all about books on Paris, books I bought in Paris, books about Paris that I want to read, and Paris bookstores. So it's a very full series. I also want to explore the kind of romanticization of Paris and of its literary scene, or the romanticization of Paris through literature. I will admit that I am guilty, absolutely 100%, of romanticizing Paris. You can hear the bells right now. I used to live in Paris back in the days, for a really long time actually. I moved to Paris when I was 7, and then what happened after that? Oh, there's people in the hall. So yeah, I moved to Paris when I was 7. I kind of grew up here until, let's say, give or take 19, 20. I lived for a couple of years in the Philippines when I was a teenager, and by then I was 14. I think I was already influenced by the Western culture to really feel comfortable in the Philippines, especially with hormones, you know, new hormones when you're a teenager. That kind of phase or stage in your life. And it was a bit too bad because my whole life, when I moved here when I was a small kid, I was like, I don't understand why we're here. I mean, yeah, it's pretty, but you know, the weather sucks. It's always raining. It was weird. It was super weird. We went from, you know, coconut trees, islands, warmth, beautiful landscapes, to all of a sudden grayscale, cloudy buildings, people everywhere, traffic noise. It was a big shock. Not that there wasn't any noise or traffic noise where I was, but I grew up in a school by the sea. Stark difference. And so my whole life when I was small, I was like, I don't want to live in Paris. I want to go back to the islands. And finally that happened. And when that happened, I was completely lost. I had already started a sort of high school, junior high school in Paris. I found that I was a bit too attached to Paris, actually. And so at 16, I came back, finished my studies. My parents kind of wanted to migrate back to the Philippines, and I was not okay with that. I didn't want to migrate back, at that point at least. I was really determined to stay here, determined to kind of find a way for me to stay here. So my relationship with Paris has always been that of a love-hate relationship. I wouldn't say love-hate though, or would I? Yeah, actually I would. Actually I would. Yeah, it was pretty hateful at times. But now that I don't know if it's because I don't live here anymore, but I just have love for it. And maybe it's also because I've read so much about it, and so it kind of kept the romanticized version ideal in my head. So here we are in Paris, and is great with the sunshine. Enough talking. So I want to talk to you about the books that I haven't read yet of Paris that I brought with me. I haven't read these books, but I'm interested in war period Paris. Actually, the Paris of the 20th century in general, I feel is a very tumultuous and extremely exciting time. When I think about it, the modern times are also quite exciting. It's just, it doesn't have this vintage allure. And so, of course, it's not as glamorous when you read about what's happening right now in the city of Paris, which is always, as usual, tempestuous, lots of friction going around. You know, this is a city of beheaded kings and stuff like that. So yeah. The first book I want to talk about is called Poems of Paris. It's a very popular poetry anthology edition. What is it called again? Yeah, so the Everyman's Library Pocket Poets. I love their little anthologies. They're very compact, small, beautiful, and just so easy to bring around. Don't talk to me of love. I've had an earful, and I get tearful when I've drowned a drink or two. I'm one of your talking wounded. I'm a hostage. I'm maroonded. But I'm in Paris with you. Yes, I'm angry at the way I've been bamboozled, and resentful at the mess I've been through. I admit I'm on the rebound, and I don't care where we are bound. I'm in Paris with you. Do you mind if we do not go to the Louvre, if we stay sawed off to sodding Notre Dame, if we skip the Champs-Élysées, and remain here in this sleazy, old hotel room, doing this and that, to what and whom, learning who you are, learning what I am. Don't talk to me of love. Let's talk of Paris, the little bit of Paris in our view. There's a crack across the ceiling, and the hotel walls are peeling, and I'm in Paris with you. Don't talk to me of love, let's talk of Paris. I'm in Paris with the slightest thing you do. I'm in Paris with your eyes, with your mouth. I'm in Paris with all points south. Am I embarrassing you? I'm in Paris with you. This is by James Fenton. It's obviously not translated. I like that. I have a favorite poem from this book. I don't know if I'll find it. Yes, I think I can find it here. It's by Rilke, of course. That is my favorite. Rock, rock, rock. Where would it be? This one is also a beautiful one by Jacques Prévert. 3 matches, one by one, lit in the night. The first to see your face complete, the second one to see your eyes, the last to see your lips. And then darkness complete to let me think of them again, as my arms hold you, hug you tight. That was nice. I want to look for it in French. Like, what would be the French one? Jacques. Ah, je crois que c'est mieux en français, hein? 3 allumettes, une par une allumées dans la nuit. La première pour voir ton visage tout entier, le second pour voir tes yeux, la dernière pour voir ta bouche et la obscurité tout entière pour me rappeler tout cela en te serrant dans mes bras. Oh, do you like that? I love that. It was awesome. I feel like I'll never find the poem that I'm looking for, which is extremely strange. It's like it doesn't want to be found. I remember buying this with my friend Olivia when we went on a trip once to Paris together. It was a couple years ago. Yeah, something like that. We went to Smith & Son, which is a bookstore that has a great giant English collection. It's on Rue de Rivoli, just in front of the Tuileries Garden, and I got this one among others. And then we both walked to the Tuileries. It was sunny. I think it was September. No, I don't remember now. But it was sunny. It was nice. We went to sit down on those chairs, you know, at the Tuileries. A lot of people go there to just sit and read because it's quite idyllic. I mean, why wouldn't you? We just sat there and we just looked at the Tuileries and we just opened this book up and then we, you know, read poems out loud. And that's what I mean by romanticization of Paris. It was great. You know what? You know, we shouldn't be ashamed of romanticizing certain cities. As long as you can kind of see or acknowledge the fact that you're romanticizing it, and you can also acknowledge the sort of underbelly. I love that about big cities. There's this certain kind of energy in these big cities that is undeniable and also normal. You know, these places are just full of life and full of, you know, millions of people. It's a lot. It's a lot of stuff that can happen, a lot of stuff that you can find. And it's, you know, Paris itself is not huge, but it's so compact. There's so many layers and levels. Oh, I just love it. There's a book actually that a writer that I love wrote about New York. New York isn't jobs, they reply, it's temperament. Most people are in New York because they need evidence in large quantities of human expressiveness, and they need it not now and then, but every day. This is what they need. Those who go off to the manageable cities can do without. Those who come to New York cannot. Or perhaps I should say that it is I who cannot. And I would say exactly the same thing about Paris. I cannot. I just love it. I love walking in the streets, observing people, seeing the multitudes of everything. It's just great. There's this also really interesting passage in an essay collection that I read by Andre Asselman where he talks about Freud and he talks about Freud's relationship to Rome. I would love to find you the passage. We'll see about that. But basically, Freud was really attracted to Rome in the sense that it contained multitudes, similar multitudes than the psyche, the human psyche. Okay, so I actually went and looked for the passage that I was talking about. It's from an essay called In Freud's Shadow by Andre Asselman in his essay collection Homo Irrealis, which I loved and you should read. So these are the few passages that I kind of picked out that relates to what we were talking about in comparing the city of Rome or any kind of city that is old and vast to the human psyche. Here goes. For Freud, Rome is the perfect metaphor for the human psyche and ultimately for the human experience. Nothing stays buried forever. All things resurface and ultimately lead into, feed off, and abut others. Instead of a sequential manner, Freud proposes an audacious model, suggesting that what was originally present and is now past can continue to survive, not necessarily underneath what is visible, but alongside its latest incarnation. What is primitive is commonly preserved alongside of the transformed version which has arisen from it. This proposition, alongside, is key to Freud's Rome. The ancestor lives not below its descendant, or even just alongside its descendant, but, to push the point, the ancestor becomes its descendant. It's as if the original pagan script on a palimpsest not only never disappeared, or continued to exist contemporaneously with the text written over it, it may even overshadow what came after. The later rubs against the earlier, and the earlier talks back to the later. Like Freud's fantasized Rome, where layers of time zones are constantly being reshuffled, the psyche may be likened to a souffle in the making, where desire, fantasy, experience, and memory are all being folded into one another, without sequence or logic or the semblance of a coherent narrative. Being in Rome is part imagining and part remembering. Rome cannot die because it never, ever really is. It is the shadow of something that almost was, but stopped being, but that continues to pulsate and craves to exist, though its time either hasn't come yet or is already gone, or is both coming and gone. Rome is pure fantasy. It is not quite there, not quite real, not unreal either, but irreal. What does Rome mean to Freud? Is it a stand-in for something else? Is it a jumble of unresolved memories, desires, fears, fantasies, traumas, blockages, repressions, etc., all bunched together from babyhood to adulthood, each not just layered on top of the other, but existing, to use Freud's apt word, alongside the other? Perhaps the question to ask is, how does Freud come up with the most brilliant metaphor in the history of psychology, stating that the psyche, like Rome, is not one thing? That identity itself is not one thing either, but a confluence of many movable and shifty, transient parts that trade places, change faces, don and doff all manner of masks, lie, cheat, steal from one to give to the other, which is why we don't know who we are, or what we want, or why we can't find forgiveness for sins we're not even sure we've ever committed. And maybe that's true, you know, like you're in a city like this of millions that has attracted millions for a very particular reason. A lot of people come to Paris because of the energy, the special energy that is created by the architecture, by the French culture, by cuisine, by music. People come here because, you know, they can find like-minded individuals easier than if they were somewhere else. And I feel like that's a large difference between people who kind of move to the big city and who kind of seek out that excitement and seek out that, you know, friction, that intensity that you don't necessarily always have in other places. And I feel like, obviously, you know, peace is great as well. I know that if I lived in a big city or in Paris, I couldn't live here in a situation wherein I would need to count every penny. You know, it's easy to be in that situation in Paris. That's certainly the situation that I was in Paris back a long time ago whenever I lived here. I don't know, you also like get into a routine, you have a job, and it's kind of stops being so glamorous. The next book I'm going to talk about that I still want to read, I read like a few essays here, but not everything. Paris, je t'aime by Colette. I talked about this in my booktube newbie tag. I actually wanted to read it during this trip, but in the end that didn't happen because I went to a bookstore and then I got Marguerite Duras' book, a really small book, Écrire, on writing, and I thought that was something that I needed to read right now. Marguerite Duras, I've read one of her books. I really liked her writing style. It's really intense. I don't know how I would describe it. I read a few passages, so I decided to read that instead. And Paris, je t'aime is basically Colette's little essays, you know, on her views of Paris and how she loves Paris. Interesting to read what Paris was like back in the days. There was a point where she's talking, you know, in the Champs-Élysées, there used to be just people giving grains to birds, and it used to be a bit more rural because back in the days, it was pre-globalization. You know what's interesting as well is when you look into YouTube and you type recolored footage of Paris, or any place, by the way, if you have a projector and you're projecting on a giant screen, people have worked on these videos, and it's fascinating, and it really makes you imagine what it would be like at that time. But anyway, Colette's Paris, je t'aime, Le Palais Royal après la guerre, Palais Royal after the war, Le Brie bicentenaire. She talks about Bette Davis, The Silence of Children, Ma poésie c'est ma province, My poetry is my province, Un petit rez-de-chaussée à Perron, et la rue de Passy s'appelait la Grande Rue de Passy. Ce temps est loin. Wow, so there's actually a street that used to be called something else. Fun fact. This seems to be a really cool little collection to kind of just have this snapshot of Paris back in the days. I've actually tried to read books written in French originally that were translated, and I don't like them. I was like, I don't like this. Maybe there's a part of me that's a bit guilty for reading them in a translation. One of those books is actually In the Café of Lost Youth, Dans le Café de la Jeunesse Perdue, Patrick Modiano. This one is translated by Chris Clark, apparently winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature. It opens with this quote, At the halfway point of the journey making up real life, we were surrounded by a gloomy melancholy, one expressed by so very many derisive and sorrowful words in the Café of the Lost Youth. This is by Guy Debord. I find that I should probably read this in French, and I think I'll like it better. I didn't actually finish it, I just started the first chapter. And I know that chapters have different points of view, so maybe it was just that point of view that I didn't necessarily like. I'm gonna try to look for this in French. In the Café of Lost Youth is vintage Patrick Modiano, an absorbing evocation of a particular Paris of the 1950s, shadowy and shady, a secret world of writers, criminals, drinkers, and drifters. My jam. A novel inspired in part by the circle depicted in the photographs of N. van der Elksen of the notorious and charismatic Guy Debord centers on the enigmatic, warlike figure of Loki, who catches everyone's attention even as she eludes possession or comprehension. Through the eyes of four very different narrators, including Luki herself, we contemplate her character and her fate while Modiano explores the themes of identity, memory, time, which is all the things I would love to read about. So yeah, this is really the kind of book that I would gravitate towards, actually, the themes. This is exactly what I love to read about, or write about, or think about. It's very short. If you want to have a little trip of Paris in the 50s, I guess this is a good book to read. You know what? I'll let you know if I read it in French eventually and if I like it. Next is a book I really want to read, but I'm kind of unsure whether I want to read it, you know, now, or if I want to read it after I've read some of the authors that the book mentions. So it's called Dreaming in French, The Paris Years of Jacqueline Bouvier-Kennedy, Susan Sontag, and Angela Davis. I have a few Sontag's books, but I haven't read yet. I have The Volcano Lover, I have her essay collection, the famous essay collection Against Interpretation and Other Essays, and this little collection that I actually got yesterday at the Abbey Bookshop at the same time. I really like this cover. I think I was mostly attracted to the cover, and I kind of flicked through it and there was topics that I found interesting, and so I got it. And so Susan Sontag I have to read. I don't have Angela Davis yet. I might get one. I don't know. So I really enjoy reading about authors after I've read their works most of the time, because I read their works, I get really interested in their lives and what informs their work, just to kind of make that connection. I want to read this after I read maybe at least one of the authors mentioned. A Year in Paris, Countless American students have been lured by that vision and been transformed by the sojourn in the City of Light. Dreaming in French tells 3 stories of that experience and how it changed the lives of 3 extraordinary American women. All 3 women would go to become icons, key figures in American cultural, intellectual, and political life, yet their backgrounds and their dreams couldn't have been more different. Jacqueline Bouvier was a 20-year-old debutante from the East Coast. Susan Sontag was 24, a Jewish intellectual from a family of modest means, and Paris was a refuge from her family and academic responsibilities. Angela Davis, a French major at Brandeis? I don't know how you pronounce that. Brandeis? I think that's a school. Sorry, from a prominent African American family in Birmingham, Alabama, found herself the only black student in her year abroad program. In a summer when the news from Birmingham was of unprecedented racial violence, Kaplan takes readers into the lives of these young women, tracing their paths to Paris and revealing how their experiences abroad reverberated in their career choices, personal identity, and political ideology. In Kaplan's skillful hands, these 3 different stories become one evocative biography and prove that a single year and a magical city can change a whole life. I completely agree. Dreaming in French. I'm really excited to read this, actually. It's fascinating because you can see that this is a thing that happens often, how Paris really changes people. I mean, the famous line of Hemingway, Paris was a movable feast. But it's true, Paris is a movable feast for Paris stays with you. It's been true for these authors, it's been true for other authors. Another book I want to read that I brought with me, I always thought I'm gonna bring this in France or Paris one day and I'm gonna read it in Paris. But I never do. It's been a while. I've had this for less than a year, but still a few months. This year I have to. I really have to read this one because it's been a long time. It's Paris Was a Woman. Portraits from the Left Bank. Fascinating, less well-known story of the remarkable women artists and writers who made pre-war Paris the cultural capital of the world. Riveting. I love that. I've only recently discovered sort of the female literary heritage, the women that were in Paris during the time of Hemingway, for example. My education of women in Paris started with After Sappho by Selby Winschwartz, one of my favorite books ever. It was so beautiful, and it was basically about the women that were influenced by Sappho and the women from the left bank that made up literary culture in Paris at the time. Gertrude Stein, Alice B. Toklas, Juna Barnes, Natalie Barney. So many of them were lesbians. So inspiring. Originally published more than 20 years ago and winner of a Lambda Literary Award, Paris Was a Woman is a rare profile of the female literati of the female literati in Paris at the turn of the century. Now with a new preface and illustrations, this scrapbook of their work highlights the political, social, and artistic lives of the renowned lesbian and bisexual modernists, including Colette, Juna Barnes, Gertrude Stein, Alice B. Toklas, Sylvia Beach, and many more. Sylvia Beach, who of course opened Shakespeare & Co. Profusely illustrated and painstakingly researched, it is an enlightening account of women who, between wars, found their self and their own voice in Paris. A wealth of photographs, paintings, drawings, and literary fragments combine with Weiss's revealing text to give an unparalleled insight into this extraordinary network of women for who Paris was neither mistress nor muse, but a different kind of woman. Whoa, I love that sentence. That was amazing. Literary fragments combined with Weiss's revealing text to give an unparalleled insight into this extraordinary network of women for who Paris was neither mistress nor muse, but a different kind of woman. This is so exciting. It has these beautiful photos, letters. Natalie Barney with Romaine Brooks. Natalie held pagan rituals and theatricals for women in her garden. Participants included Colette, Sarah Bernhardt, who was the first actress superstar, so she created the icon from acting. Eva Palmer, this one was exceptional in allowing men and boys to assume leading roles. I love this so much. I'm very jealous. I wish I was alive at the time and that I was, okay, you know, we're not gonna talk about the wars and stuff, but you know, look at this. Literary people that are in a garden performing plays, being all reciting poetry and eating cucumber sandwiches and having sex. This is amazing. This definitely contributes to my romanticization of Paris. But you know what? Who romanticizes Paris? The romantics, the people who make it alive with things like this. The Sarah Bernhardt, the actress, was known to walk around Paris with a crocodile on a leash. She was like, you know, the first Lady Gaga. If you want to learn more about this, definitely read After Sappho. A photo of Colette. I'm just gonna like leaf through this and show you a bunch of photos because it's beautiful. I know who this is. This is Janet Flannery. She was with a woman called Sol. Who's she called? Sol? Solita, yes. Solita Solano, who also wrote books. So she was an American writer and poet. I'm really interested in these kind of books that kind of trace back the lives of these people. Biography is a new genre that I read since last year. I haven't read biographies before. I haven't been interested much in them. I feel like it's just my tastes that are growing, and also I've been led there by certain projects that I needed to make research, and Paris has always been, for me, it's been a muse in terms of like what to write about. Amazing books. This is super exciting. Thank you for watching. The third video will be all about all the books that I have read about Paris that I recommend to you wholeheartedly. And yeah, I'll see you on the other side. Don't forget to subscribe. If you want to learn more about Paris, let me know if you have books on Paris that you have read and that you would recommend. I would love to know. I'm like collecting them. There's a little part of my bookshelf that is dedicated to books on Paris. I want it to be full. Every time I go to a bookstore, especially popular bookstores in Paris, I'm super excited when I go to these bookstores because they usually have a section of books about Paris, and it's always really interesting how there are so many books on Paris. Literally so many. And I would love to read them all. I know they're not all good, but I would love to read them all, and I feel like that's the magic of Paris. People write about it incessantly. They always have, they always will. And yet, the city remains elusive. Thank you for watching this video. See you on the other side. Yes, I'm so happy because I'm in Paris. I just should live here. I should just live here.